Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Presidential Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, Pampers Podcast, Philadelphia Flyers only podcast. I don't know if people knew that or not. Some people recently, we have a 5-star review that we'll get to later in the show that said, with a winking face, that we're not the only Flyers podcast. It's silly. We're the only Flyers podcast with Bundy. It's pretty simple here, ladies and gents. All right. But we got a team that's actually a good team that continues to find ways to win. And so we're going to break this all down for you tonight, or for you today. And we're happy that the trio is back. Bundy is back, which means that it's time to get real about the Philadelphia Flyers. So without further ado, let me first welcome back Bundy to the program. Those of you who checked out the Press Row show for the Coyotes game got to have a little back and forth with Bundy. But Bundy, welcome back to the show. Did you miss us too much last week?
I always miss you guys. It was kind of like I got stuck in like north of the border for a few days. I'd been up there seeing friends and my mom and dad, and so I was on a hiatus for a few days, guys, and I wasn't totally sure how my internet would be working up there. Canada just got internet last week, and they're kind of stuck in the middle of it a little bit, so they're working out the kinks. They said next time I get back, and if I'm up there in the next 3 or 4 weeks, they'd have the internet working properly.
Yeah, you mean the high speed is equivalent to the exchange rate?
Yeah, I actually they've just come out of the can with the string thing on it, and they're moved into the next evolution, which is apparently like the 1996 AOL package, where you dial it in and you hear the beeping. So they're progressing, and I'm happy about it. But it's great to be back with you guys. And yes, Russ, team is winning games. That's all that matters, is piling up the points right now. And last night was a good example, as we were talking on the Press Row show, where Arizona is a horrible team. Me and Anthony were talking before. I mean, they're as bad as you're going to get, but you still have to beat those teams, and you don't want to be the first team to lose to that team. So credit the Flyers for staying with it, being but again, Arizona is so bad, the Flyers should be winning games like that.
And, you mentioned the poor internet, and I think back to the old sound, when you're tying up the phone line, that, and some people might have heard our co-host here. Don't get scared, ladies and gents. That is not a dial-up modem. That is the overloaded microphone of Anthony Sanfilippo. How you doing, pal?
Thanks, Russ. That's a hell of an introduction. I appreciate it. Every week, there's always some kind of, snide remark coming from you toward me. That's all right. It's all good. You got to learn to respect your elders, but I guess you haven't gotten to that point yet.
There's elders, and then there's whatever you are.
That's
all
right.
So
thanks, son.
Let's get into some of the things that have happened with this team. Obviously, last week, for those of you who didn't keep up with the Press Row show, you missed out on an opportunity last night, but I do have good news for you. So if you missed out on the Press Row show, you subsequently missed out on two, not one, but two Flyers Alumni Game ticket giveaways that we did during the first intermission and the second intermission. We're going to obviously keep rolling with that as the Flyers continue to play at home. There aren't that many opportunities between now and the Alumni Game, but we're going to continue to do that, I believe, with the Press Row show. The next opportunity I believe we have is next Wednesday against the Maple Leafs. So I think that's the only opportunity, right? It's the only home game between now and the Alumni Game. So we're going to be giving away some pairs of Flyers Alumni Game tickets there. But of course, because you're listening here on the podcast feed, or you're watching us over on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel, we want to also make it worth your while to listen to the show. Of course, you do that anyway. You're here. But we're going to be giving away, let's say, two pairs of tickets on today's episode. It's not going to be some kind of arbitrary criteria. I don't actually remember what Anthony said he wanted to do in terms of how we're going to do the giveaway for those. He says a lot of things.
No, my suggestion was at some point in the show that we give out like the keyword or whatever the heck it is, and that whoever sends that back to us on Twitter or through Facebook or on the YouTube page comments, you collect all those people, then you do like you did before when we had giveaways. You just do like that random draw and pull winners out.
Oh, we could do that.
Easy enough, right?
I'm going to let you run that. You're going to just like drop the random keyword at some point during the episode. We can make it like a learning moment. So people have to stick around, obviously, throughout the episode. We don't want to give it away too early. We don't want to wait till the very end. We'll figure it out. So you can win a pair of tickets to the Flyers Alumni Game. It was actually kind of funny because usually when you do giveaways, there's that question of like, did you rig the vote? You know, Bundy over there got a real good chuckle about somebody's comment last night when he picked his favorite question, and that one Chris Freed, who's been a longtime listener and viewer of the Press Row Show, his pair of tickets. But we also had another longtime listener and viewer win a pair of Flyers Alumni Game tickets. The man who has photoshopped Anthony so lovingly in a Speedo on Twitter for the better part of the last year and a half. So that was a really exciting thing.
And I wish I knew. I wish I would have known that. I wouldn't have called his name out so quickly.
Yeah, you would have tried to rig the vote. Thanks, Ant. That is wrong. You should be ashamed of yourself, Ant. Ashamed. All right, so without further ado, let's get into what this team is, because last night they took on an Arizona Coyotes team that is an abject failure, a disgrace. Bundy, I know that you had a lot of strong words about the Coyotes before the teams played, and you compared them and where they're at as a team versus, like, say, a Seattle Kraken. Can you kind of give people who might have missed the show last night a little bit of insight into what you think that Arizona team was going in, and maybe, I don't know, did anything change your mind by what you saw in that game last night?
No, and again, it's nothing against Phil Kessel, but Phil Kessel starting, the game for Arizona and Philadelphia. If that, Phil Kessel was a very good secondary. I mean, not even want to say secondary. He's a good part of the Pittsburgh Cup teams, but he's beyond anything anymore of being, top end, high talent type of player. So when I look at Arizona, they have some good pieces. Like we talked about Jacob Chikrin. I like Jacob Chikrin. He's playing as a number one, and I don't know, maybe he is a number one, but he's not there yet in his development. So that's a problem. Clayton Keller, I don't know what's happened to him. He was supposed to be like the guy that was one of the features in the league, and whatever they're doing with their development in Arizona, however they're developing these guys is not working. I look at a team like Arizona, guys, and you know what? And again, it's nothing against the people or anything, but I've been there many times over the years for games. Because nobody shows up at them. I mean, they have to have a dynamite team to even get close to a sellout. And then when you watch, they have a coach, I don't even know who he was when they hired him. I never heard of his name before. This is a problem when you get, when you're trying to, cut corners on stuff. And when you watch the product, you got a team that's winless now in 10 games. Did they compete hard last night? They did. But when I look at a team like Seattle, I mean, that was like a free pass. I'll be honest with you, I think Ron Francis did an awful job in Seattle in comparison to what they did in Vegas. I mean, they gave the city of Vegas right out of the gate an opportunity to see what a winner looks like, a Stanley Cup final berth. But you have teams like Arizona where the fan base doesn't care. It's pretty obvious the league doesn't care. And obviously their ownership group doesn't care at all because the product is a complete dumpster fire. Move to Quebec, get the hell out of the desert, go somewhere where people are actually going to care about hockey again, because it's not in 100 degrees in the middle of the desert in Arizona. It should be up north somewhere. The league needs to start getting better and more inventive in this stuff. I mean, again, I'm fine with Seattle having a team. It was a good hockey base in the Western Canada. I would assume that would fall into Seattle. But again, why are you pushing on franchises like that other than the initiation fee? It's a lot of money that they're paying. There should be putting markets, building smaller rinks like the Winnipeg model in Canada and trying to garner getting fans back into it. But the Arizona model, guys, it's awful. And it's not working. It's a complete disaster.
Yeah, and the worst part about that, Bundy, is that they're going to be moving out of the arena there. They're not staying in Glendale. That lease is up. They're not going to let them back in. And rather than look, like you say, look at a place like Quebec, which I think would be the most logical place to go at this point. They're talking about going back to that old arena in Phoenix. Well, what's that? I mean, where they used to play in Phoenix, or where the Suns are. Yeah.
The basketball arena. Whoa. There's seats you can't even sit there.
Yeah, and be careful there, because the Suns arena is not an old arena, is it?
They used to play at that America West arena. Remember, it was like
I'm pretty sure that's what the story I read. I'm pretty sure that's where they said it was going to go, but back in downtown Phoenix, not out in Glendale. That's where they were going to. That's where they're looking to put them. Like the ownership group does not want to move out of the area. Am I right, Russ?
I think so.
Thanks.
So. Is that Footprint Center?
That might be the name of it. I mean, whatever the name of it is now.
If I remember correctly, they did a bunch of renovations to it because
they did renovate. It's the same. It's the same building. It's the same building.
Little fun fact over on crossingbroad.com. You can learn that It's one of the very few arenas in the country that is going to have a dedicated sports book built in the arena.
Yeah.
It's actually open and available now if you go to Suns games. So if you're listening in Arizona, you're welcome, I guess.
There you go.
I guess.
But yeah, I mean, that's so like you're right. And I think that's where the NHL misses the boat a little bit. I mean, I understand why they originally expanded into these markets to try and grow the game. But when you look at all these southern and southwestern markets, I mean, really, how many of them have been successful? I think Tampa, yeah, okay, because the team got good and everybody got behind it. Fine. Dallas,
tickets.
Right. Dallas, Dallas did well, I guess. And Nashville. I think Nashville's been okay, right? I mean, those have been your successes. Arizona has not. Florida has not been a success, right? Obviously, they don't do well. Carolina's only good when the team is good. When the team's not good, they don't draw down there at all. And then even if you go out to California, the California teams are okay. I mean, I guess, but I mean, LA is LA, and then you put a team in Anaheim. Like, I don't know. Is there enough appetite for two hockey teams in that little area? I mean, I don't.
That came on the heels of some great coaching by Coach Bombay, and that's why Anaheim had his team there. All right, that's
Gordon Bombay. That's right.
Forget that. It had nothing to do with finances. It had everything to do with Coach Bombay.
I get upset now that I guess they did that Disney Plus series where they made it seem like Bombay goes on to be, I don't know if he's an alcoholic. I don't know if he's just like down on his luck. He's like living in the basement of the rink. I don't get it. I don't like it. It sullies the good name of Gordon Bombay. There will be no Gordon Bombay slander on this podcast. I just want to, I guess, gauge from you guys. Do you really think that it fundamentally changes things if they move that team out of Arizona? Like, if they do move it back into Quebec, like, is that a scenario where like this poor product then has to get elevated because the folks in Quebec are going to be that ravenous for a team? Is this just an example of an American sports team that's allowed to kind of flounder and to just kind of exist and have no pressure because there's really no market for the team? It's just like an owner who gets to pull in all the revenue that's generated by the other markets and the other teams in the league that are working exponentially harder, spending more money and such to raise the overall valuation of the teams.
You know what? Let me just say something just about the Canadian market first. And I know I touched upon it a little bit last night before the game. First of all, I think Gary Bettman hates Quebec. I don't think that, I mean, the fact that they're not there already tells me the commissioner wants nothing to do with the city of Quebec. That's probably a tough pill to swallow for a city that I played in for one or 2 years in Quebec, and I loved the market. Like, they were packed, they were into it. One of the great rivalries of all time was Montreal and the Nordiques, right? Like, going back in the 80s, that was a dynamite rivalry. The problem is that if they're taking a look at where the chips will fall, I don't think you have to look much farther than the city of Ottawa to see what that model looks like. Like I said, guys, I drove past the building twice last week, about 30 to 45 minutes before puck drop, that I didn't even know it was a game. And there was nobody at the building. It said 11,000 people in Ottawa. That's the nation's capital. An October game where it's early in the season where you'd expect fans to be out in masses to see their team play. They got Brady Tkachuk signed. You know, there should be a lot of excitement. Nobody's going to the games in Ottawa. And the games on TV looked empty when I went back and I was watching a little bit with my dad at the house. That's embarrassing. Like, that's a real embarrassment. And so they need to figure out why. Now, Ottawa's got a lot of reasons. I'm a hometown native of Ottawa. I want to see that city do well. I want to see that franchise thrive. They did a lot of things years ago they're still getting blamed for, putting the rink, 20 miles outside the city where they could have put it downtown. That might have made a difference, but they're still dealing with it. And that's where I wonder if the commissioner is wondering, what does the Quebec model look like based on how things are looking in Ottawa? And you know what? There's other teams that have struggled too. Vancouver wasn't necessarily sold out every single night over the last 3 years either.
I just think it's interesting. I think it's it's something that the sport doesn't really address, and I think we'll get into a little bit later. I mean, Russ and I dove into the whole Blackhawks thing last week, so we don't really have to dive back into that specific topic, but just how the league has handled it. We didn't really talk about the league. But when you look at the league, kind of sweeps a lot of things under the rug. They don't talk a lot about a lot of things, and one of it is that the franchises that are not doing well, and how to fix it. they basically just let it go. And it's funny, you mentioned Ottawa. Yeah, they were a bad team for a few years. But if you go back before they were bad, go back to when they made the cup run a few years back, that place was packed. And that was a great spot to go, and go back to even, when Brad Marsh had his restaurant out there. That was a great little place to go. And it was people liked being out at that arena when it was the Corral Center, I think it was called at that time, right? And it was you don't just lose a fan base, especially in Canada. Something has to go wrong. Something that either the organization is not doing right or the league is not doing right in support of that organization. And you have to kind of fix it, because if you're not selling hockey in Canada, what's up with your product, right? I mean, then you got to question the product.
Yeah, it's kind of like being in America and not being able to sell anybody on caring about the World Series. Oh, I'm sorry. We won't go.
But I'll make a comparison though, Russ. I mean, seriously, this would be like an NFL team not being able, not selling out their games, getting half houses.
Yeah,
that's what it would be like. And it would be like the Washington football team, because we're talking about a similar size. I mean, it's a nation's capital. Ottawa and Washington are about the same size. Land-wise, I think there's more residents in the DC metro area than there is obviously in Ottawa because of the population. But at the same time, it would be like the Washington football team being terrible, as they have been, right, for a long period of time, but nobody going to the games, nobody really caring about it, nobody checking in, at the start of each new season. Like, a lot of people thought that Washington team was going to win the NFC East this year, 2-6, and they're in last place. But I mean, at the beginning, it would be like at the beginning of the season, and people just going, we'll check it out later. We'll go another time. They don't care. That's what losing interest in the Senators does to the NHL, right, Bundy?
You're 100% right, Anthony. And here's the problem too, guys. This is another issue when I looked at it. When I looked at the two opponents Ottawa happened to have, I took two interest in these games because I was absolutely mesmerized by the lack of people in attendance. They played the New York Rangers, right, in the afternoon game Saturday. And on that Monday night, they played the Washington Capitals. Number 8 was playing, by the way. Mm-hmm. And there was still nobody there. That is a guy who could break Wayne Gretzky's all-time record. His career is winding down, and you have an opportunity to see him. And nobody there. Building looked half empty. It was more than half empty. So those are major problems too, because you got to consider who's coming in. When I look at teams, so I have Eagles season tickets. I like going out to the Eagles game with my kids. So for the years, it's been great time together. But I'm not going to lie. When I see, I look at the schedule and I see Tampa Bay coming in now, I want to go see Tom Brady. Even as a former athlete, I want my kids to see that. Where if I see some other team like the Washington football team come in, I may want to get rid of those tickets instead. So, but again, that's got to be a concern if Ottawa can't get more people or those type of franchises by drawing in. I'm sure Arizona is no different than Ottawa. When you have a guy like Ovechkin coming in, you'd think people want to get excited to go see that player and draw crowds for that home team, but it's not happening. That's what's going on. I wonder how much of it is financial also, guys. It's a lot of money to go down to any sporting event now. Any sporting event. You go down to a Flyers game last night, you buy your tickets, you park and get yourself a beer, a hot dog, your kid a Pepsi and a burger. You're easily looking at over $300.
Well, Russ, you did something on this. You did something on this a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, we did. And that was being pretty conservative in terms of cost, because I think we priced it out as a family of 4. And you figured, given like the ridiculous prices, even of the upper level tickets, even on the secondary market, you figure at least with fees included, you're probably looking at $70 a ticket, maybe 75 a ticket. So you're at $300 on tickets alone. If you wanted to play the conservative game and say $50, somebody's looking to offload tickets last minute. All right, it's still $200. Parking now is what, 20, was it 24, 26, 22?
22, I think. Yeah.
All right. So let's say 22. So you're at 222 at least. And then you go inside and you eat. I mean, that could add another, I don't know, $60, maybe more. You go back for 2 beers, you get your kid another soda. You decide to buy your kid a little gritty plush toy in the pro shop, or, God forbid you think about buying a jersey, because they're not overpriced or anything, like that stuff starts to add up. And we brought this up a couple of years ago. We had a lot of people triggered by it that, we were inflating the prices. And it's like, well, no, a family of 4, it's going to cost over $300. That's not there's really no way around that. Now, again, here's the one positive, and maybe this can be a good time to throw out our first pair of tickets to the Flyers Alumni Game. The word of the day is inflation. Okay, you can go and you can send that.
Well, I was doing this.
I decided to do one. You can do the other one. Inflation, ladies and gentlemen, because you see the price of everything going up, including, there were rumors that the Flyers were looking to increase the price of their parking pretty substantially. Hasn't really happened yet, but they did go to all card. And, we've seen this time and time again now that the all card digital or credit card only parking hasn't really worked out that well in terms of efficiency. A lot of people coming into games late, presumably because they can't just hand out the standard cash and move through faster. So you got that. And then obviously the price of everything else goes up. Gas prices are up. One has to assume that food prices will continue to increase. So inflation. Huh? Yes, stop. I went to go fill the car the other day, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's the one positive, I guess, now of working from home is I don't have to gas up both cars nearly as much, but holy hell, it's rough. If you have to drive for work anywhere substantial, you, for example, going up to the Great White North, it's costly. And I can't imagine you're driving you're not driving a Tesla or a Prius, are you?
I'm a pickup truck guy. It's actually probably cheaper to fly than it is to drive.
Yeah, you might be right. Right. It's interesting you mentioned parking. Well, we talked about this a little bit. I know we've kind of gotten off the team for a second. We'll get back to them, but parking has become a nightmare down there because of this cashless system that they put in place. And I get why they put it in. I mean, it was put in for COVID reasons, and they kind of thought it would maybe expedite things a little bit. And it really hasn't. It's really gummed up the works. People are getting into the building later and later and later. And I'm not sure that they know if there's a solution or not. The only thing I can think of, and Russ, you're more the technology guy than I am. But what if you have tickets to the game, that they can give you a QR code in advance that you can scan with your phone and prepay your parking. And so that all you have to do when you go down there is either show them the receipt on your phone or print one out and just hand it in, boom, and then they just let you through, as opposed to, we got to take the little handheld thing out. You give me your card, I put it in. We have to wait 15 seconds, take it back out, give it to you. Here's your receipt, blah, blah, blah. And then meanwhile, you're lining up cars behind everybody, and it's taken forever to get in. I got down there last night at 6:00, and the line was already backed up to 95. For the A gate, the main gate coming in off of 95. So the main gate coming in off of 95 was already backed up an hour before the game for a game that had maybe at the start, maybe 11,000 people in there. I mean, it probably got up to about 13 and a half, 14, if I'm being fair, total by the end of by the time the game was over. But an hour before the game, it only had 11,000 people showing up, and you're already backing up back to the highway. That tells you that there's a fundamental problem with the way you're doing it.
I don't know if they're doing like Apple Pay and Google Pay and Samsung Pay and everything. That would.
Well, they said they are. They said they are.
In theory, that
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know because I have a parking pass, right? So I don't know if that.
So you know what, guys? But I know you're right about why they're doing it. But again, use common sense, right? Historically, people go to sporting events, will carry $50 or $60 in their pocket. 20 goes to parking. Okay, let's go park. We go into the game. Most of these people, if you ask my mom and dad went to a hockey game right now by themselves, I don't know if they'd be able to get into the parking lot because I'm not sure they have the right credentials and stuff to give them. It's a mess. That's what's happening. People are going. They probably don't have the electronic stuff that they need. Go back to cash for parking. At least give people an opportunity to get in the building instead of sitting out on Broad Street waiting to get in. I didn't go last night. Honest to God, I was going to go down. I said, I'm not sitting in that. I don't want to wait going in the gate. I'll go to the big.
To go to your question really quick, yes, they theoretically could do a QR code in the same way that you would do like a on the printed ticket. If you did the load up, the loaded option for the food voucher or whatever, I believe there's a separate code that goes with that. They could. I mean, you would prepay for parking. And honestly, I think if you gave people what's effectively a fast pass at that point to a separate lane or a separate gate, make it, what is that, F? It's the F lot where we go in, and then down past that, I think it's like E and D or whatever.
Right.
If you designated one of those lots as a fast park, you prepay for your parking, you show up, you pull out your phone, bingo, bango, bongo, that's it. Like that to me is a smart way to do this. It's an easy way to do it. And it's going to save a whole hell of a lot of time over what's happening right now, because the fact is what's happening right now isn't working. Now, I'm sure somebody would argue that like they're still working out the kinks, and like that's fair to some extent, but like they're doing this for all Wells Fargo Center events, right? So it's not like you only have the opportunity to implement a new thing or to try something new on Flyers games only. Like you could be doing this for the Sixers. You can be doing this for concerts and other things.
For the Eagles too. You do it for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it as a test run. Like I don't see why it should be a problem. I think it makes a lot of sense, but you know, you noted before that we kind of got off the beaten path. So let's get back to the Flyers here for a second. So, you know, a big part of this obviously is since the last time we recorded, the only games I believe that they played were the Calgary game where they kind of no-showed and it was kind of ugly. We talked about it on the Press Row show last night. And then we had this Coyotes game. I'd rather, instead of going back to the Flames game, let's look at how the team reacted against the Coyotes, because you go into a game like that over the last 2 years, and that's a game that you would pretty much put in as a stone cold lead pipe lock. The Flyers are going to underperform. They're going to lose this game like 2-1, maybe 4-0, something stupid where they play down to the level of the competition. You get into the middle of the second period. You've blown plenty of opportunities. Arizona gets on the board, and then it all just kind of goes sideways. To this team's credit, they didn't let that happen. They had a goal wiped off the board that every player who came out and met with the media after, and I believe Alain Vigneault also noted that they kind of agreed with the call in the aftermath. The Cam Atkinson goal that was disallowed, where he, you know, masterfully took the puck, deposited it in the back of the net past former Flyers defenseman Shane Gostisbehere, who was a turnstile on the night. I know that's shocking to a lot of people. Was a turnstile on defense last night. You know, when you guys look at this team's resiliency, they didn't let that moment, or the fact that they had kind of blown some decent opportunities early in that game, deter them from continuing on and winning the game. Bundy, you know, based on what you saw last night, is this a positive sign for this team going forward, that they didn't play down to Arizona and that they didn't get too down on themselves, and, you know, they bounced back? They had a solid enough third period.
I'm going to kind of disagree a little bit, Russ. I thought for 2 periods they did play right down to that level. I mean, I thought they were garbage, to be honest with you. I don't know what else to say. They were the fact. I mean, let's just face facts. If Arizona scores 1 goal out of the multiple chances they had towards the end of the second, it could be a whole different result. They are just so bad, Arizona, that the Flyers ended up getting away with it in the third period, where, you know, a good skill player like TK makes a good pass to Couturier, but I don't think they outplayed that team at all. I actually think they played right to that level and looked every bit as bad as Arizona until they ended up getting the lead. I will say this, though, Russ, they did stay with it after that non-goal call. They could have really come undone, but I mean, what else are you going to do? But I was not impressed with that effort last night. I was impressed with the final score, but not the process in which they got there.
Yeah, and
to be clear, I mean the fact that it wasn't 3 periods of dreck. Like they
So
they pulled up the nose on the effort in the third.
Yes. Yeah, I tend to agree with Bundy on that, Russ. And it was up until that no goal. I would say that was kind of maybe the turning point for them a little bit. I think that's when they finally started to play a little bit more. But up until that point, they definitely played down to Arizona. And I wrote about this after the game. And my whole lead was, you know, the coach was telling us that first period was good back and forth action, a lot of chances and great goaltending. And I thought it was just terrible play by both teams. I really did. I didn't think it was, I disagreed with Vigneault completely on that. And then, second period was Carter Hart. I mean, he's the story of the whole game with the shutout, but the second period, for most of that second period, it was all Arizona. And Carter Hart kept the Flyers in the game. Now, I also pointed out in the story that it was almost to the day. It was only off by a couple of days. But in 2017-18, the Flyers played Arizona at the Wells Fargo Center. It was October 30th was the date, so it was only 3 days difference. Arizona came in 0-10-1.
They won.
And won the game in overtime. Now, what happened in that game is Arizona got that lead that Bundy was talking about. They scored that 1 goal, changes everything, right? But they were up 3-0 in that game. The Flyers had to make this miraculous comeback in the third period, scored 2 goals in the last minute to tie it just to get to overtime and then lost in overtime. And so that's a point that was left on the table back then. If anything, if you're looking for a silver lining, the silver lining is that it never got to that point in this game. And that the Flyers were able to get the 2 points that they needed to get. You need to win those points against teams like this. And they got them. It was ugly. It wasn't pretty, but they got the 2 points. And so that's the one silver lining as a team result that you could take out of it. But otherwise, yeah, I didn't think that they played that good of a game at all.
Agreed. Yeah, I do. I mean, and you know what, Anthony, and I'll give, and to say something credit to the Flyers. I mean, that was the coming off the road trip game.
Yeah.
Which, historically can be a bad one, So, I mean, if you're looking for a reason, I'm not saying that they were bad last night simply because they just played down. They're also coming off a road trip, first home game back. And early in the season, I'll give them that kind of excuse, but they did not play well last night. And I'll tell you what, that team that last night, that Arizona team, if they played that other Arizona team, Anthony, that other Arizona team would have won like 7-0 against that mess that the Flyers played last night.
Yeah.
That's a
so
fact.
Then let's look ahead at the upcoming games for this week, because you're not going to be able to get away with some of what they got away with, especially considering that you've got 2 division games coming up. You've got the Penguins first up. They're 3-3-2 on the season. They've been dealing with injury issues. They actually got off to a pretty surprising start and have kind of come back down to earth, I think, the way that people would have kind of expected them to. And then Washington, who sit ahead of the Flyers in the standings by, a point? I believe at this point, 2 points at this point, having played an extra game. When you take a look at what to expect this week from the Penguins and the Capitals, if the Flyers put out the kind of effort that they showed, at least through 2 periods against the Coyotes, or the no-show that they did against the Flames, are we having a very different conversation next week in terms of what this team looks like and their resiliency?
I'll take this one first. We could have a very different conversation. The only thing is I'm not sold on the Penguins. I think the Penguins are a really inconsistent team. They've had a lot of injuries, to be fair to them. But Crosby's back now, but they're still missing Malkin. They just got Carter back off of COVID. I think Letang went down with an injury now. Brian Russ is still out. So they've had a lot of big name players not play. But overall, when you look at that roster, I'm just not enamored with it. I don't like their goaltending. The combination of Jarry and DeSmith, I don't think is a very good. I think they're both 1Bs, right? I think they're kind of what they are. I don't think it's a great goaltending tandem that they have. So, who knows what you're going to get out of the Penguins? But you can't. So you might be able to play slightly below your A game and still pull one out against them in a kind of another ugly game. But I don't think you can play that way against Washington at all and expect to come out with any kind of success, with any kind of points in a game like that. You know what I'm saying? I think you might be able to get away with it a little bit against Pittsburgh, certainly not against the Capitals. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. If they come out and play the way that they played last night against those 2 teams, you're probably only coming away with a point, maybe at best. And that's not a good spot to be in. I mean, these are the first division games of the year, and the division games matter more than any others. You got to finish in that top 3 to guarantee a playoff spot. 4th place usually gets in. 5th place is kind of, the iffy one. So yeah, you really have to do well against these teams, and every game matters in the division. So these are important games for them to be playing their best hockey.
And you know what? You're right. And again, a lot of it's momentum, like how your team is going. I find this whole league, guys, and Anthony, you've been around it a while too. I've never seen more momentum in a sport like I've seen in hockey over the course of the last 10 years. Both like the way the schedule goes, where you're going up, and then when you go down, you stay down. But the same thing happens in the course of a hockey game as well. These momentum swings that go up and down through the course of a hockey game. So again, winning the game last night's a good thing, but you're totally right. I mean, I don't want to go into a division game playing like they did last night against Arizona. And you know what? I don't think they will. I think there's a good, clear focus with this group early in the year. And again, I'm not demeaning the group by them winning and not playing good last night. That happens sometimes. And sometimes, maybe 8 or 10 times a year, there are games like that. Well, you are right. The games will get bigger and richer. as it goes. And you know what, guys, to be honest with you, it's been kind of a mixed bag, the schedule, when you just look at the Flyers and just glancing through it. I mean, they paid out of what have they played, 8 games now? The 4 of those 8 teams of the games, 4 of those games, because they played Vancouver twice, are kind of middle of the road, way less than average type of teams that they're supposed to win, and they did get those points. Vancouver, they lost 1 in overtime. But, Edmonton, Calgary, Boston, and Florida, really, really solid. And the other 4 were the games that you really had to kind of win. So in the games that they've had good competition, they've played well. And I expect them to continue trending like that. You're not going to win every one, but I agree. Washington, to me, is still a big, tough team. And I still, the big team that can score goals, makes good plays, and they're still a real dangerous team. Pittsburgh, as you said, Anthony, before, they're getting a little long in the tooth, but there's still that rivalry. There's still that energy that comes out of both teams when they meet each other, and Pittsburgh will be ready to play the Flyers every time, especially now with Hextall there behind it.
Well, and here's the other thing, and I don't know, not a lot of how many people look this far ahead into the schedule. And I know a team looks at it and says 1 game at a time, and that's a nice cliche. But I mean, as people who are analyzing the sport like we are, and you look at the Flyers' schedule coming up, there's no breaks. Really, for the next month, there's no breaks. I mean, we talk about Pittsburgh and Washington. Then next week, it's Toronto, Carolina, Dallas. The week after, Calgary, Tampa, Boston. The week after, Tampa, Florida, Carolina. Then you got the Devils, the Islanders, and the Rangers 3 and 4 nights. And Tampa, Colorado, and then Vegas. I mean, they don't get a break. They don't get a break again until December 11th when they play out in Arizona. I mean, that's a brutal stretch of games. This is where the season will be made or broken for this team, I think, over the course of the next month.
I think it's probably worth taking a look really quick at the stand. If you look at the standings, just in terms of points, you get a somewhat skewed view. But if you adjust for points percentage, Carolina's off to an insane start. Washington is at 722 on points percentage.
5-1-3. The Capitals.
Yeah. And then the Rangers, who are a team that we talked about as being, in line for a surprising season, perhaps being a team that could be in the playoff mix. They are ahead of the Flyers right now, fairly.
They might have the best goalie in the game right now, too. Shesterkin.
Really good.
He's been unbelievable.
Really good. Yep.
And then you've got the Flyers in 4th, Columbus in 5th, the Islanders in 6th, then New Jersey, then Pittsburgh. So based on our preseason predictions and based on what you've seen so far, how close do you guys think this could be in terms of the end of the season? Are we seeing where these teams could sort of find themselves? Carolina clearly right now is the class of the Met. And then you've kind of got this the next 3 or 4 teams are pretty tight there between Washington, the Rangers, and the Flyers. Columbus is there, but I can't imagine Columbus is going to stick around, right? So at some point, the Islanders are going to have to factor into this, and you can't write off the Penguins as long as Crosby and Malkin come back with enough time this season to make an impact, correct?
Yeah, I mean, going back to just my preseason predictions, I mean, I had Carolina 1, I had the Rangers 2, I had the Flyers 3 with Washington 4 and the Islanders 5, but I think it's going to be, it's always close. The division's always close. Nobody runs away with the division, right? I mean, I think it's always close. So I think that those are your top 5 teams. And I had Pittsburgh 6. Yeah, you're right. Columbus will drop off, and so will the Devils a little bit, even though they're out to a decent start, even though they're in 7th place. I think they have a winning record. But I mean, look, like I just said, we're looking at 18 games here before they get a break against another weak opponent. I would venture to say, and this is not crazy, but I would say they have to get at least 50% of those points in those 18 games. If you have a losing record over the next 18 games, that's not good. I think over those next 18 games, you got to at least come away with 18 points total or better, obviously, or better, right? But you could survive. You got off to a 5-2-1 start. You could survive if you're 500 over the next 18 games. Would you like to be better than that? Yes, but they're playing a real brutal schedule. If you're less than that, then I start to think, then you start to worry, right? You start to wonder does this team have it? Is the it factor there? I don't necessarily know if it is at that point.
And I agree. So if you're saying they're going to get 18 out of 18 games, 18 points?
Yeah, that minimum. Yeah.
Well, then if that, and I'm going to say this probably because if I'm the GM and that happens, I'm looking at a coaching change right away.
Really? 500? You're looking at a coaching change?
Yeah.
Even with that tough, with that tough of a schedule?
18, you're at 10 right now. You're looking at, I still think that keeps you way under the curve, Anthony, like in terms of where you are in the stat. I think you're done. I think if you go 18 points in 18 games over that stretch, I think you're in massive trouble and you're well behind the 8 ball. That's just the way I see it, because I don't know if, to me, I think you need 36 points out of that. I think you need like 24, 25 points.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it's just a tough schedule. I mean, I think it's brutal. I mean, if there were some easier games in there, I would say yes.
I'm not discrediting what you're saying. I agree with you. But I'm saying that if you have 18, like you just said, to get 18 points, a point a game average over those 18, I don't think that helps you in the standings. And I think that probably gets you down around 5th spot in the Metro at that point.
It could.
Just a glance ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it could, but I don't think it keeps you that far out either, though. Like if you're down,
you're not done.
Yeah,
but you're not sitting in a position you want, like that American Thanksgiving. First of all, I think that adage is kind of done because it doesn't flow the way it used to because of the overtimes. And so I think the teams that are in necessarily at Thanksgiving, there's still some merit to that. But that's why I really feel you're right. It's the biggest 18-game stretch of the season, I think, because of the challenges involved. I just took a glance at those games, but I really do think, no disrespect, that they need to do far better than 18 points in 18 games.
Yeah, that was my low bar.
Like that's the thing too. Well, I mean, sure, but like that's the thing that I think you have to look at in terms of if you're a team that believes that you're a legitimate contender or that you're a legitimate force in your division or in your conference, you have to get more than a point per game. The team, a year ago, 2 years ago, pulling that off, it would probably be seen as like a decent effort. But if you want to create any kind of separation from what is going to be a really tight pack in the, let's say, mid to upper, echelon of the Met, you have to do better than a point per game. I think Bundy's right. Now, I don't know if they would make the coaching change based on that. But if not, you're looking at a scenario where you're really going to have to bust your ass down the stretch to give yourself a legitimate chance of making the playoffs. I want to throw this out to you guys because we've talked about this before. And there are two things at play right now that I think bother me about hockey that I can't wrap my head around. You look at what the Atlantic Division is. The Atlantic Division right now is underachieving. And I get it. I get that this is not how the entire season is going to play out. But for better or worse, when you look at say the NBA, right, where records are kind of factored in a little bit more, where you're not necessarily giving out as many, let's call them participation awards in terms of the final rankings. Like, are we in a scenario right now where the NHL should consider maybe taking away some of the guaranteed spots in the postseason? If one division, like if the Metropolitan finishes with 6 teams, let's say, that are exponentially better than the Atlantic, should the Atlantic still get 4?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So you're saying that just so then you're going to a full conference mode then, right? You're just going to say take the top 8 and try to throw the divisions.
Yeah, I mean, you could still keep, I guess in theory, you could still keep the divisions just for the rivalry aspect or whatever. But yeah, I kind of view this as your best 8 teams in each conference should get in. The division should have no bearing on that. If we look at the current projections right now, I just had them pulled up, but Florida, okay, Florida's had a great season. Coaching change, we talked about that last week. Tampa, obviously Tampa's going to be good. But if Boston's the only other good team that really breaks through, or if Toronto is the only other good team that pops through, then why shouldn't they only get 3 if 5 teams in the Metro or something are that much better? It's a tougher division right now. It looks like a tougher division. So it just bothers me. And that leads me to this other question that I think is kind of tied to this. The loser point in hockey. At what point, and is there a point, and Bundy as a former player, would it bother you if this league took on, say, the soccer scoring system? 3 points for a win, 1 point, I guess, for an OT loss. Do you look at doing tiered point systems where it's 3 for a win, 2 if you lose, or 1 point if you lose in overtime, but nothing if you lose in the shootout?
No. I would go two. I would go 2-1. 2-1 in the overtime. I mean, every game has to have the same value.
You're saying like curb the value of an overtime win, taking it from 3 to
every game in my mind should have the same value. So the way it is now, it's
regardless, Anthony, if it's overtime win during play or regulation, shouldn't regulation get 3 points?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So every game should have the same value. So if every game is right now, they don't. Right now, a regulation game is only worth 2 points to the winner. It's nothing to the loser. But in overtime, the game is worth 3 points. It's right. It's not balanced. To me, it should be all the same. So you either eliminate the loser point, which they never will do, or you expand what a regulation win is worth to 3, so that each game has the same value. So if it's you win in regulation, you get 3. And if you win in overtime or shootout, you get 2 with the loser getting 1. That's fine.
I like that because it gives you to me, it gives you more intensity and competition in the first 60.
Yes.
Especially the third period. Because if you're a team let's say you're the Flyers playing Pittsburgh, right? And it's a 2-2 game. I have more incentive in my own head to win that game in regulation.
Correct.
And that's the mindset of the player that'll happen. Whereas if you go to the overtime and you get the same value, you're like, well, you know what? Let them have their 1. I'll flip a coin and try to get the win in the OT. And believe me, that happens on the bench where you're like, hey, let's just make sure they don't probably say the F word. Make sure they don't have to score right now,
it is
guys.
A podcast.
I know. I'm trying to, in case kids watch. I have a kid still.
Oh, gotcha. Yes, that's.
So I'm always vigilant. But that's what I'm saying is, so I've heard guys, I played 1 year where they had an overtime rule was involved with the shootout, and guys are like, hey, just don't get scored on. Let's just get the point in overtime. We'll take the 1, hope we get the bonus.
Right. And if you make regulation worth more, teams will try and win in regulation.
Correct.
I mean,
would the super radical approach here be 3-2-1, 0? 3 in regulation, 2 if you win the overtime, 1 if you have to win in the shootout, 0 to the loser. That would be pretty gutsy. I like
the 0. I like somebody coming out of there and taking a bus or a plane home with 0.
Because to me, you have to figure out a way to incentivize if it gets to overtime. Like I could almost even see saying it finishes as 3-1 if it's in overtime or in the shootout, because you still want to incentivize winning in the run of play. And not winning, as Vino calls it, the skills competition. Like going even down to like 2-1, if you're a team on the road against a superior, club, your goal is going to be to come away with a point. So even if it comes in the shootout, you're happy to get the point. I don't like complacency.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Russ, I'll give you a perfect example. It's funny because we were talking about that 17-18 Flyers team that lost to the Coyotes, who were 0-10-1. At the end of the year, that Flyers team won 42 games. That's all they won, and had 98 points. They had 98 points because they got 14 loser points. Yeah. And they made the playoffs as a 3 seed. They weren't even a wild card. They were a 3 seed. They won 1 more game than they lost in the regular season. We're 42-40. In all honesty, I mean, it's 42, 26, and 14, but they lost 40 games. Okay, and ended up being the 3 seed because they got 14 loser points, and they were no match for Pittsburgh. Even though it went 6 games, they didn't have a couple good games in the playoffs. But nevertheless, they were not a match for Pittsburgh that year. They were not. They just didn't belong there, and it's because the loser point elevated them to a position they shouldn't have been in.
Agreed. So good. We fixed hockey. Well, we fixed at least one element of hockey. Can hockey really get fixed with Gary Bettman in charge? I don't know. Probably not.
So Russ, by the way, this is what was your word of the day for the first pair of tickets?
Well, I'm not going to say it now. People can go back and rewind. That's part of incentivizing, Anthony. They have to listen to the whole show. They can't
so I'm going to give the second one here, but I'll say this for people: if you put both, then Russ will give you 2 entries into the hopper.
Sure.
Right? If you tweet both, just in case somebody didn't get to this point. So this is a bonus for the people who listen to this long, right? In the podcast, they can now put both words and get 2 entries instead of just the 1.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Sure. I don't care.
All right. So loser point. Loser point is the other phrase or word that you got to put out there.
Loser point.
Loser point. Well, it's 2 words, but yes.
So instead of one keyword, we've now gone for 2 words.
Well,
so
you took it away from me earlier, so I decided to change the rules too. So I
took it away. I know. I'm the Antichrist for that. I'm so sorry that it threw the whole Sanfilippo strategy out. All right. I think that's probably a decent spot to end, because without knowing how the next couple of games are going to go, I mean, we'll be back next week. They host the Maple Leafs. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, we'll be back with the Press Row show next Wednesday for Flyers Maple Leafs at Wells Fargo Center. That's a TNT game, I'm guessing, right? It's a 7:30 start and it's on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So we'll get to see, soon to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, Flyers Hall of Fame, Rick Tocchet, on the set for TNT. So that'll be exciting for people listening for talk. And we'll be giving away more Flyers alumni tickets on that Press Row show. Remember, if you've gotten this far, or if you skipped ahead, hoping that we would kind of recap the words, we're not. You have to go back and listen to the whole episode. You tweet them at us, you send them to us on Facebook, and we'll enter. You'll be entered in to win. We'll give away 2 pairs of Flyers Alumni Game tickets from this episode alone. How about that? That's exciting stuff. That's why we are the People's Podcast.
Speaking of exciting stuff, Russ.
Yep.
We have 3 5-star reviews to read this week. Now, one was from last week that we held off on because it was directed to Bundy, and we wanted to make sure that he was on the program.
That's right.
To get it. And then we had 2 new ones. So we have 3 that have to be read.
All right.
So as always, you go over to Apple Podcasts, you leave a 5-star review. Even if you don't know how to use Apple Podcasts, don't worry. You get somebody else to help you. Get a niece or a nephew or a kid or somebody to help you figure out Apple Podcasts. First one is from Tyler Mish. Great pod, 5 stars. Been listening to this pod for 2 years. Not one to typically take time to write a review, but I feel the need to for these guys. Excellent coverage, plus the addition of Chris Therien completes it. Best Flyers podcast by far. Also, please tell Chris I got a signed puck from a Santa sack probably 15 years ago, and it's still showcased in my room. Go Flyers.
That's awesome, dude. That's great. Thank you for that 5-star review. I appreciate it.
Look at God. What do you think? What do you think his reaction though was when he opened that Santa sack and it was signed by Chris Therien as opposed to
I'm gonna get his puck.
You could have had Leclerc, you could have had Lindros, you could have had Ronick, you could have had Eddie Desjardins. You got Bundy.
But in fairness, as we went over on the Press Row show, Bundy was like a 91 on the NHL game, which we'll just say got him really excited. So there's that. All right, let's keep going. We have Ari Logan, who says 5 stars, winning out west. Great analysis of Chicago Blackhawks sexual assault issue and discussion of Flyers' great start. Enjoy the show each week. So thank you, Ari.
Thank you. Yeah, that was good. I thought last week was a good episode. We really got into that real hard, and then it was good. It was good. It was good for us to do that. So
it was not
I don't have enough time to talk about it right now. So
yeah, it was not an easy part of that episode to get through, but we did it, and it's gotten worse. In fairness, I mean, at some point we might have to do an update on it, but the NHL continues to vomit profusely all over themselves with this scandal. So
there's other stuff going on now too, Russ, as well. Like with another assault case through the league that I just read on TSN this morning involving Minnesota or something with Pittsburgh. Sorry, my dog's going wild. But
the dogs also don't like Gary Bettman's handling of sexual assault allegations, and they're not afraid to let you know.
Very disappointed about what he heard the other day in the press.
Yeah. And then our final 5-star review of the day comes from Donovan Buck. 5 stars, not the only, but very good, with a winking face. I've never left a review, but after Friday, I have to. I love how this show makes no excuses and is honest to how the game is played. Thank you for the entertainment and great insight. Keep up the good work. Recommend to anyone that listens to Flyers podcasts.
That's awesome. Thanks, Donovan.
Tough, man. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
We appreciate all our listeners. We love you all. You guys are great.
We
Keep
do.
us going.
Great. It's great.
This actually gets us, I believe, over the 200 5-star review mark. I'm going to have to double check for any duplicates. I know that Lee C leaves a review almost every week at this point now. So Lee C might be skewing the data a little bit. But we're doing okay. I believe we're at 223 5-star ratings over on Apple Podcasts. So listen, we love the reviews because the reviews make Anthony smile. They make Bundy smile. They warm the cockles of my heart. But if you don't feel so moved to, put fingers to keys, at least, hit that 5-star on Apple Podcasts. And again, if you don't have an Apple Podcast account, you don't have an Apple product, you can still set up, quote unquote, an Apple account to leave a 5-star review. Pop in there, leave a 5-star review for Snow the Goalie, and then peace out. Never worry about your Apple account that may or may not exist from that point on. Just leave a 5-star review there and everything's great.
And I'll keep having my kids put those 5-star reviews in too, guys.
That's right. Oh, we need to send that check, Ant. What is it?
That's right.
What was the agreed upon sum? Was it $10 a review? Anyway, positive note. This is another good thing. Those of you who end up winning tickets to the Flyers Alumni Game, we have it's pretty much a block. It's like a 20-seat block. So those of you who win tickets, you're going to be seated around other Snow the Goalie listeners. So you can have fun with that. You can start chants. You can start ridiculous things. You can post all over social media. We'll retweet the hell out of it. It'll be great. But I think it's going to be kind of nice. Nice to, have a little cheering section for Bundy specifically.
Yeah. And you know what? And I talked to a couple of guys this morning that are going to be playing. We promise you that the game will be a little bit faster than what you saw last night. We've had guys working at their skate and puck handling, and that's going to be kind of our guarantee. Come on out, buy some tickets, a little bit cheaper than what it costs for a Flyers game. It'll be a lot of fun.
So if you can't win the tickets from us, you can still buy some. But, like we've been saying, we're up to now. This will be the 4th pair of tickets, 3rd and 4th pair that we're going to give out. So we're at 8. We still have 12 more tickets to give out, 6 more pairs. So get excited. If you're out there, if you're listening, if you've been watching the Press Row Show, get excited. We'll be doing more giveaways between now and the Flyers Alumni Game. So set that date aside. You never know what'll happen here on Snow the Goalie. So make sure you follow us over on Twitter at Snow the Goalie, at CTarian6, at Ant Sanphilly, at Joy on Broad. You can find us on Facebook.com/Snow the Goalie. And of course, you can watch these episodes over on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel. So you can just type in Crossing Broad. You can type in Snow the Goalie. We have a playlist under the Crossing Broad channel that you can go to watch these episodes as well. They usually go up after the podcast. So if you want the latest breaking news, you go to the podcast feed first. But if you want to see what it looks like when Bundy laughs at one of our jokes, by all means, you could do that. If you want to see Anthony be really salty when I apparently shade him at the top of episodes, it'll be fine. We're not going to mention the fact that Anthony is omitting the fact that he blew up one of his betting previews in the back end of the Crossing Broad site. He left it looking like Dresden. Is that too soon? Maybe it's too soon. Doesn't matter. Ladies and gents, thanks for tuning in to Snow the Goalie. We will be back again next week. And don't forget, we'll have the Press Row Show going next Wednesday as well. And we have a couple surprises lined up as we, move closer to the alumni game. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some guests. At least one.
I said surprises.
At least one.
You're a former
teammate?
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe.
That'd be pretty cool.
Be.
By the way, that game went under last night.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Bundy.
See you later, boys. Have a good week.
Yeah. Go back and watch the Press Row Show pregame from last night, and you'll pick up on that one. So,
yeah. Thanks.
Good chat with you guys. We'll talk to all of you out there in Flyers land next week.